All right, guys, out here trying to get a little bit done on the 331. A couple of the main problems that I'm trying to solve today is I bought this little test kit over here. It's a little cheapy, so that I can plug into the back of the pumps there and test the pressures coming out of the pumps. Because everything on this stick right here, the left stick, is weak. That stick over there, everything is strong. And even without the pressure tester, I could kind of tell that that stick was just stronger, because you could set the machine just at idle and you could curl the bucket in until it strokes the cylinder out, and it would drag the engine down pretty good. You could pick the boom all the way up until it stroked out, and then it would drag the engine down pretty good. And then this cylinder, or this switch here, or lever here, you could pull it back, pull the arm back. When the arm got fully stroked, when the cylinder strokes all the way out and the arm's all the way back in, closest to the machine, it still wouldn't, it would drag the engine down slightly, but nowhere near as much as it would that other stick. And then same with swing. You could put the bucket up against something and try to swing it. It just wouldn't drag the engine down that much. And the swing on this thing has been kind of weak ever since I got it. Again, this is my first excavator. Didn't know much about them, so it's been a learning experience. It's not been bad. I like this little machine. It's got a Kubota engine. Starts up every time, anytime. The only little aggravation I do need to fix is when you key it on, this one always pull in. Sometimes it'll sort of sit there and do nothing. You can leave the key on, and as soon as you turn the key, you either hear this click or you don't. And if you don't, I'll kick the key on, I'll just come over here and do that, and it'll hold itself there, and it never unclicks. We'll see if it'll do it right now. Key clicked, but the solenoid didn't. You see the solenoid's still out. All I do is, and then it'll hold itself, and then you turn the key off, it'll release. So I don't know if that's the solenoid. I'm assuming it's solenoid. It's just kind of gotten weak, because the electrical's obviously working. It powers up. It just doesn't have enough power to pull itself in. So that's one thing. The other thing is this front track roller here. It's gone bad on me, so I might try to pop this track off and get that roller out. But it could use new sprockets, definitely. The previous owner put new tracks on. Didn't do new sprockets though, for whatever reason. So, but the main part of this video is I want to figure out why this stick here and all the functions on it are weak. So I've been hydraulic chasing and tracing, and I'm not an expert at this by any means, but I do know that this left-hand joystick, everything comes down in here into this 3-spool valve up front, which is of course the most aggravating place to get to. And I did have a portion of a service manual, service and repair manual, and then it does talk about on these, this is a 97, 98 331. It didn't have the switch. It doesn't have a switch to change the controls from standard or ISO or SAE to ISO. So you actually got to change the hoses around. So I actually think I'm going to do that right now. I think I'm going to try to change the controls over by changing the pilot hoses coming out of these sticks, and see if my problem moves with sticks or if it stays in the valves. So I'll bring you back when I figure out how to do that. So I'll have to look through these hoses and think on it for a minute. So bring you back in a second. All right, guys, so I played around. I basically took, this is the main boom, and down in here basically the third valve in is the arm, or the stick. So basically pulled that pilot hose off, moved it over here to the main boom, pulled the main boom off, moved it over here to this pilot hose. And I didn't bother with the ones on the back. So basically, this would boom down and stick out. Sorry, you didn't have it on the camera. So this would boom down and then it would stick out going back. Side to side was still bucket curl. And then this one would stick out, or this one would stick in, and this is boom up. So basically what I was looking for is I just wanted to see, because before this stick, none of the functions could really drag the engine down. So I just wanted to be able to see, all right, shove this down, boom up as high as I can, which before would drag the engine down off the other stick. So that function booming down will drag the engine down pretty hard. So it doesn't appear that it's in this valve. It appears it's something in this main 3-spool valve down here. So another way I confirm that also is this foot control goes back to the 6-spool valve along with the 2 travel levers, and then the boom and the bucket curl. This foot valve swings the boom side to side off the house. So when I ran it as well, just out of this 3-spool valve, it's pretty weak too. It doesn't have a lot of power. So it's telling me there's something in this 3-spool valve that is a problem, whether it's a relief or something along those lines. I don't have to break out a bunch of pressure gauges and check the pressure on every single thing. I'm just trying to hone in on my problems right now. I did check this solenoid here. So this solenoid basically controls everything in the pilot system somehow. I'm not exactly sure how the schematic, but I did unhook it and was testing the voltage being commanded to it. So when it's unhooked, nothing works. So I do know that. This one, I'm not sure what it does. I'm not sure what this spool does. So I'll have to dig more into that. I am going to have to, pretty sharp edge right there. See, it's ate into the back of that hose already pretty good. As these things have been working, and every time you raise it up, it crashes into that back angle right there. So I had to put some protection on this hose. Probably cut a piece of heater hose and just wrap around it and zip tie it for now. But I was thinking about doing the front roller, but I'm going to get this hydraulic issue figured out. I'm not going to mess with track rollers or anything else till I get this hydraulic issue solved. So I'll end up going ahead and swapping those control lines back to where they should be and trying to figure out something else in the 3-spool valve. So I will catch back up with you shortly. I was sitting here trying to determine what these solenoids are. I found that out. This solenoid right here on this accumulator, this is your interlock solenoid. So if that doesn't get power, or if that's not functioning, you won't have any joystick functions at all. And then this solenoid is your 2-speed. So I got tired of trying to troubleshoot it on my own. I decided to went out and bought a manual. So bought it online, 15 bucks I think. Service repair manual for this thing, basically factory repair manual. So it was a little different than a previous iteration of a manual I had found. That must be for a different serial number break. So the main thing it tells you to do first to test the first, basically for testing the hydraulic functions, you start out on pump section number 1, which is where I got my tester right now. And I bumped it up to my 5,000 or 5,500 PSI gauge, or 6,000 PSI gauge, because this thing will go up to a little over 4,000 pounds on one of these functions here. So basically this is, pump 1 comes in down way down in there. And then it feeds through this. This is your first relief here. It should be at 2850 psi, just picking the blade up. So if you put a gauge on, and this is whether you're troubleshooting anything, whether electrical or hydraulic or anything, you go back to the source, make sure your source is good, and then work your way through the system from there. So the first thing the manual tells you to do is test this. Is it this relief right here? Because this actually brings that and boosts it and goes over to here, over to this other valve. So this should be 2850. It was low, and I probably don't have the oil all the way up to 160. It's 50 degrees out here right now. It's not cold. It's not too bad. So this should be 2850. I've got the oil warm. I let this thing sit here and run for 15-20 minutes while I went inside and had lunch. So the oil's pretty warm. The tubes are decently warm, but they're not 160. It was still down on pressure. At high idle, I think I was getting 2400, 2500 psi. So all you gotta do is pop this cap right here, loosen that jam nut right there, because you got the main nut at the back, jam nut, and the cap. So you pop the cap, loosen the jam nut, turn some more pressure into it to the right. One full turn should be about 700 psi. So I bumped that one up to 3000 psi because, again, it's a little bit, the fluid's still a little cold. So as it warms up, it will drop a little more pressure. And then if you do a combination of blade up, your second test is blade up and swing with the swing lock engaged. I didn't bother to engage the swing lock. I'm just jamming the bucket down to the ground. But so you do that, and then it should bump up. That pressure should be 4100 psi. So I'm working on this relief right here. That's what I'm doing. See, this is the jam nut. You'll have a little screw flange right there. So I've already turned. This thing was straight up and down. So I turned it roughly a little more than half a turn. I've actually gone past half a turn a little ways. Because a full turn, well, no, I need to go a little further, so I'll take that a little further. And I'm going to tighten this one back down and test it and see what my pressure is. Again, it's roughly 700 psi. There's an O-ring between the cap and the jam nut. There will be a little oil trickle out of there. So there's an O-ring even between this nut here. So make sure you get your O-rings in there. Make sure they're not damaged, just to keep things from leaking. I'm gonna get this put back together and test the pressure, and I might have to adjust one more time, but I'm gonna creep up and get that probably to about 4300 psi, because again, the oil's a little colder than it should be right now. And then I'll test it out and see if my functions are working like I think they should. So. Okay, so that's a big improvement over what it was before, and I probably should have done a before video, but I didn't. you could put the bucket down, pick the front of the tracks up, and just with the arm, it would not crowd itself in. It wouldn't even slide the bucket. Even with the teeth not in, just the bottom of the bucket, it would not slide the bucket back and forth. It didn't have enough pressure to do that. And then it didn't have enough pressure to slew the house with the bucket down on the ground. So it definitely needed an adjustment. It was always that way since I bought it. It was always weak. It seems like it's gotten a little weaker. I've loaned it out to a buddy or two. It had a leak under the house too. I finally got that fixed. So it had been leaking and seeping fluid. So every once in a while I had to have fluid added to it. And I think they might have put some lighter fluid in it than what it had. I don't know that it's right, wrong, or indifferent necessarily. I imagine the previous owner probably put some heavier fluid in it because he was having problems with those functions. I might go ahead and drain all the fluid and put a consistent weight fluid in that I know is right, because I'm probably gonna have to pull the pump, because if you can see right there, this bolt, the pump side closest to me, there is no bolt in this pump. Only one bolt holding this pump on. You can see I can actually shake the pump up and down. So number one, that's real hard on the coupler between the pump and the engine. And it's probably hard on the pump bearings and seals as well. So that could be maybe the reason why number one pump might be degrading. I don't think it is. It hit pressure, it hits relief, so it's still doing okay. This relief here, I didn't tell you it's a 7/8 nut, but on all these 7/8 hex, I adjusted this up. I still could not get it. I really can't adjust it any further. I was actually starting to twist the blade on the screwdriver. So I adjusted it. It didn't affect the pressure. So when I go blade up and try to swing the house, I only get about 3,500 PSI, where the book says I should get 4,100 PSI with that multi-function right there. So somewhere I'm dropping 600 PSI, but then when I just do swing by itself, I think it's only supposed to be 1,700. I've got it kicked up to about 2,000 right now. So I think it's okay. I'm not exactly sure. That's a little deeper troubleshooting. I'll read in the manual a little more, maybe do some more troubleshooting on it. I might go ahead and finish troubleshooting some of the other stuff, but this is probably a decent stopping point for this video, because everything's really working pretty good. I power washed all this. I should have, if you're going to power wash it, make sure you take the front cover off, power wash in there, because you do got to get to those. That's the second adjustment point. So I'm going to call that a wrap for right now, and I will probably bring you back and maybe show you working on that pump. Hope you enjoy.